everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Work Dad podcast. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter at WorkDadPod. You can find me on Spotify, Amazon Music, all the podcast plays just with Work Dad. And then TikTok and Instagram is workdad.io. And of course, YouTube is work-dad because they can't all be the same. It would be too easy. I am really excited about our guest today. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but we're going to kind of enter a different type of career and a different type of background and a different place of work than we've done so far. And Surf, tell folks, who are you? What is your name? And what is it that you do for a living?
Well, first, thank you for having me on, Brian. I'm Surf Melendez. I am the VP of Content, Creative, and Brand at the Arizona Cardinals. I feel like I have the best job in the NFL. I get to manage all the creators, all the makers at the Cardinals, talented, and all these different type of disciplines. I get to kind of just guide them through, usher them through our deliverables, our storytelling, our branding, and if I'm doing a good job, I'm just staying out of their way.
Spoken like a true expert. It's great to have you, and thank you for taking time out of your day. This Cardinals gig is new, right? That's as of when?
This is as of Monday, so a few days ago.
A few days ago.
Right.
Wow. Well, how did that come about? What were you doing before that, and what got you to this?
So before the Cardinals, I spent the last 4 years in Nashville. I was the executive creative director for the Tennessee Titans in a very similar role, doing similar things. The projects or project there, similar as far as managing the makers, but working on a new stadium, those type of projects. So like there were just some really wild and exciting projects there. And prior to that, I was at the Miami Dolphins, also managing their creative team there and building their offerings as they were kind of going through an organizational type of kind of turnover, if you will, not from a person perspective, but from an identity perspective, like who they were. So it just every single one of these stops in the NFL, I've kind of fallen into the role of like, hey, we need to build something. And so folks call me and I just love building. And so I'll just jump into the brand and kind of see what's going on and try to bring it to life.
So Miami, then Tennessee, and then Arizona. I'm sensing a pattern weather-wise. You warm weather guy?
Absolutely.
So I won't find you up here in Seattle anytime soon. That's what you're telling me?
It's not on the radar, no.
Well, so you've done this NFL deal for a while now. Miami plus Tennessee was how many years combined?
About 10. Yeah.
10 years. Okay. So people are familiar with the concept of switching jobs, right? From one company to another. What are the things that are different maybe about how you decide when to change gigs in the NFL?
Oh man, the NFL is so unique. Each one of the opportunities were so different. I think it's probably boils down to it's really like a personal choice of, are you growing? Are the contributions for me personally? Were the contributions? Am I really growing, helping the business, adding value? I don't think any one of the clubs that I've left. I could have stayed. They were fantastic people. There were points where I felt a little guilty, I guess. Like, hey, I don't feel like I'm giving you my best right now because the business has just changed. Like the needs have changed. And so they were just ready for like another chapter. And so that you kind of can read the tea leaves. And so after a while, I'll start feeling a little guilty, like, hey man, like normally I'm used to turning and burning and we're moving things and growing things and teaching people and creating process and creating just killer work. And if it starts to slow down, or if the business changes where maybe they just don't need those type of things because they're focusing on other things, that's usually when I feel like, okay, you need something different right now. And so I kind of help them either also find that change as well.
Got it. What is you mentioned, maybe not doing your best work, or feeling like you're given everything you'd like to give. What does your best work look like? What are those situations? How do you define those?
For me, I've gotten to the point where the work itself used to drive me as far as like make the best stuff that I could, things, make deliverables that the brand hasn't made before that's going to really get them noticed and become another brand's mood board material, right? So that for me was used to be the measuring stick. Now the measuring stick for me is, am I growing the people around me? Am I
Mm.
helping them hit the goals that they want to hit? Um, I felt really, really blessed. I mean, this is my third NFL club. So I feel like I said, I have the best job in the NFL. So when I get to jump in and I get to meet people who are at the point where I used to be, if I could help them learn something, and it's not like I have all the answers. Honestly, I just been in the right room and I just took a lot of good notes and was fortunate to like absorb a lot of good lessons. So it's wasted if it just ends with me. So if I can give them back, and they can grow, and we can have the next creative directors or create new positions that the league hasn't even had from the club side, because we're doing it over here, then that's, for me, that's the win.
So your title is Vice President of Content, Creative, and Brand. And what what kind of skills do you need to do that kind of work?
I think we're all still trying to figure it out. Seriously, the creative discipline on the club side of professional sports, it's still, um, we're still trying to figure out what that is. It's kind of hard to define. For me, I boiled it down to filling a need. When I first got into the league, they wanted to create an in-house agency and elevate the work. So it started with just that, and then anything else that required any type of a creative eye, I ended up getting brought into. It just made sense, and they didn't have those type of roles. Sports teams are really good at, obviously, the thing that they do, the sport that they play, right, and growing those players, and also selling the tickets to get people to come, right, and creating incredible experiences. But when it comes to brand building, they have brands, powerful brands, but brand building, content creation, we're still kind of figuring it out. And so um, I started. I started filling those needs, create an in-house agency, create some process, find the right people, grow the right people, and hopefully the results take care of themselves. Um, I don't know if there's like a pre-described way in, quite
Mm.
honestly. I was an art director when I was in advertising, and so it was more visual storytelling. Um, and I always used to envy the copywriters because I always felt like the copywriters were able to articulate their ideas with words. And so that made them a little more, in my opinion, a little more marketable as far as creative direction went. Um, but it was just really just another way in to solving a problem. Um, and so I just applied everything that I started learning over there, just started applying it to sport.
Well, so for people that aren't aware, this is a design discipline, yes?
Not
No?
really. No, it's a strategic.
Marketing?
Yeah, it's more of a strategic discipline. So it's and that's, I think, usually what happens is, when on the sports side, when we think of creative, a lot of times they just think of design,
Mm.
and visual direction. That's probably what opened the door for me because I came from that type of background. But that's just a very small piece of it. It's a lot of it is strategic, creative strategy. um, are we speaking in the right tone of voice? So there's a lot of marketing. It's kind of tough because marketing is such a big umbrella and it's a very strategic umbrella. But I feel like when it comes to marketing, they're also tasked with like working with sales, right, and helping them sell whatever widgets we have, creating these great experiential events. I'm kind of like their partner. Not
I
kind
see.
of, I am. I'm their partner. And so when it's like, hey, marketing comes up with, hey, these are the type of folks we're going to talk to. This is what we think we should be doing. Let's an event. That's when they'll probably tap me and say, okay, how does this come to life, right? And then we'll work together on how do we communicate this out so we can get people to come to it. So there's visual, there's written creative, experiential creative, event presentation, live event creative. So like when you walk into to an event, like what are you hearing? Like what music is playing? And what are you seeing? What are you smelling? So like foods, are we doing any scent
Mhm.
marketing? Things like that. So yeah, it's kind of all I get to touch all the cool stuff.
I've not heard scent marketing.
Yeah,
But
it's
tell
nuts. So
talk to me
okay,
about that for a second.
so I first came across it. Think of it this way: like if you go to a Starbucks, like it
Yeah.
smells like coffee, and not all the time
No,
it's
it makes
because
perfect sense, but, like,
yeah, it's not because always the coffee. It might be because they're actually amplifying the smell. Or if you go by like a bakery, it might smell like warm cookies, right? And it
mhm,
attracts you to come in. Um, for a club, that also help. Like when you smell something, it kind of triggers something in your brain and puts you in a different state of mind.
mhm,
The first time I came across it was when we were creating an experience center, preview center for a renovated stadium that we were doing in Miami. So we would have this space with a model, right, of the new building and experiment videos and all this kind of stuff. Well, the space also smelled a certain way because it was supposed to make people feel comfortable, open to a conversation. I want to say for that particular space, it was like a mix between like leather because leather is like money
mhm.
and like a beech wood, like a beachy type of smell because it was just very comfortable and almost takes you to a vacation, so it kind of relaxes you a little bit. um yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff that we have to think about.
Well, I'm not through with that yet. I'm too fascinated. I gotta keep asking. So is that something that you already have awareness of, or are there consultants or there folks that specialize in scent and, like, will say, "Hey, if this is what you're trying to evoke, where do you get inspiration? Do you create a mood board that includes scent? I mean, how does that work?"
That one, I'll be honest, the first time I came across that, I was in the same place you are. It's like, "Wait, what? Like, you can do what?"
Yeah,
And so there was a consultant that we actually reached out to, and that's what they do. And they
yeah.
create these air systems, and they have little vials of smells, and they make your little concoction, like your own special mix after you go through some sessions of like, "Hey, what are you trying to accomplish? And what do you," and yeah, and then they create this whole like system that you install in like a space. It's probably the easiest one to think about is like it's food, right?
Oh,
So if
it
yeah,
makes perfect sense. The fact that there is an industry around it is fascinating to me. I'll have to get the name of this consultant offline. Maybe
I
I'll interview
gotcha.
him as well or her. So you talked about this variety of creative outputs that you're working on. Some of it is experiential, it's in person. Some of it is, I assume, visual content that's around the stadium, that's on the website, that's on social. Uh, you know, I'm not sure if you do any audio podcasting or, but music, it sounds like all these things. Um, you were hesitant about calling it design. It sounds like you've got a marketing partner who's the marketer. And so this space for you, brand, I noticed that was a new addition to your job title in this newest job. Is that meaningful? Is that an additional aspect of your work, or is that just a recognition of what you've always done?
um Both. It's meaningful to me, because I have a very deep respect for brand, and brand building and how it makes people feel and how brands do that. And it was a result that we were doing it. I was doing it already. Every stop, we were always coming back to how does the organization behave, because ultimately that is your brand. the way you behave and how you make people feel. Early on, people would think it's just your logo or something, or your colors or whatever. But it's all of it. It's how people feel when they interact. I think of it like a person. Like when I think about you, Brian, like what do I feel when I think about you? That's your brand.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. It's good. You have a good brand. You have a good brand.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. That coming from you, that means something.
And then there's other parts and pieces. Yeah, some more tactical pieces like logos and colors, and even our tone of voice, right? The way we speak. A brand, you could almost make a brand a person, right? And if they speak a certain way, they make you feel a certain way. That's who they are. So what I realized is, and it just kind of happened when I was at the Dolphins, we were trying to figure that out. Like, who are we?
Mm-hmm.
And so we would go through this exercise of, okay, well, are we this, are we that, or we're not this, that, or the other? But we were already doing certain things. And I remember we just took a step back and looked around. I was like, wait a second, but we're in a city that has its own type of vibe and flavor. We act a certain way. We've changed strategically what we were doing in market and how we were speaking to our fans. So our brand is X, right? Like we're living into this space. If you look at their brand now, like their brand voice, if you will, like that particular club, it's very Miami, very fast, very sexy, very right.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of Tennessee, it's tough, right? It's gritty. It's crafty. It's like a maker's. Nashville's like a maker's town, so it's like work with your hands type of salt of the earth type of vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in an elevated way, because like this is the same area that Dolly Parton is, and like she's like Dolly Parton, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so like there's that kind of vibe. So that brand already works that way. That's who they are. And now the Cardinals, we're going through the same thing. Like, all right, who are we? What do we, where do we want to be? How do we want to live up to our fans, and also like who we think we should be?
I've got a bunch of questions there, but let's start simply. And you kind of answered this to some extent, but most people don't really know what branding is. And they might think about Coke as a brand or Nike as a brand, and they might think it's the name or the logo or the colors or that kind of thing. How would you describe branding?
I would just, if we're talking about a corporation, a business, um, how are they behaving? How are they behaving? Let's think about Coke. Coke is the most popular brand on the planet, but they also do things a very specific way. Tactically, yes. How does their logo show up? It's very consistent every time. They're very disciplined with it. And then also their tone, happiness, Coke and a smile, that's how bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like they made a very conscious decision on that's how they want to approach. That's how they want you to understand who they are. Nike, everyone's an athlete, right? So very aspirational, right? You can be an athlete. I can be an athlete. And then how do they bring it to life? They have a discipline and their do's and their don'ts. Visual do's and don'ts, verbal do's and don'ts, all that stuff. But the core, their spirit is, hey, everyone's, and so you receive them that way. I mean, we can go on Apple, Dell, right? They behave very differently, right? And a lot of it's not just like the mark, like the logo mark. It's a lot more of it has to do with just the way in which they present themselves to market.
Well, and there's new companies, new business that needs all the brand to be built and all
Mm-hmm.
the content to be built. And then there's existing brands,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's brands within brands. So the NFL is a brand. It is a very renowned, well-known brand worldwide. You've then got teams that are brands within a
Right.
brand. You've got players and coaches that are becoming brands within brands within brands. And what maybe not everybody understands is that most brands, there's brand guidelines. And so there's rules about how a logo looks, and if you're in a specific part of the screen, how like there might be a certain rendition of a logo here. You can never have this logo next to that logo, and it must be this size or these colors. There's a lot of rules to keep the consistency you talked about with Coke. That doesn't happen by accident. There are hard and fast guidelines that must be followed. So how do you how much, let me ask you this way, how much flexibility do you have to brand the Arizona Cardinals within the NFL?
That is a phenomenal question, because it is a bit of a moving target. The NFL is an incredible brand machine. The shield, right? It means something. It signifies something. And at the same time, they're also managing 32 other clubs, other brands, right? And they all have their own point of view. So the way they do that in itself is a miracle. Then you go down to the club level, and each one of these, we have all these different parameters that could help influence who we are. The first one's location, right? A lot of times the location that you're in has a flavor, right? If you're in New York, it's different from when you're from LA, Chicago, Miami, right? So you can lean into some of that. Then you have the brand itself, the club itself. If it has a history, that might inform who they are. I won't even touch the players yet, because that's a whole nother, like, players, that creates such a variable, because you have these players who have their own personalities and their own essence and their own type of energy. And when they come to a team, if they're a known player, it kind of, you work with that, right? You shift a little bit with it, or a coach, right? Like you kind of have to move with it. Then you have these other clubs that their brand speaks for itself. And those kind of people kind of plug in, right? I would say like the most famous ones, right? You got the Cowboys, right?
Cowboys, yeah.
Right. You're a Cowboy. It's like if you're a Raider, it means like there's something about that, right? The other clubs, their brands, they lean a little differently. Some of them are still defining themselves. Like Steelers are another good one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something that comes with that brand when you say that, right? And then there's other clubs that they're trying to define that, or they're in a bit of a flux, right? Like they might be in a time in their history where they're making a relocation or something. They're making an adjustment, right? And so how does that work? The biggest frustration, honestly, or the biggest frustration is a tough word, but like more of a moving target is when you have like a new figure on the team, like a head coach, starting quarterback, starting running back, someone with such influence. How does that change things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that becomes a really fun thing to solve, because there's one thing, you can use a logo a certain way or not a certain way, like that's not going to change, but your tone, how people are receiving it, like what they see on television, which is way out of my control. I have nothing to do with what's on the field besides design work on the field, right? Like what the players do and how we perform and what our coach does. Like I have to almost draft off of that and supplement what's happening. So it's really fun. It's a fun assignment because I have to solve it every time. It's every owner's different. They also set the tone for a brand. So it's wild.
I was curious a little bit more about that, but let's just, from an example standpoint, Cowboys are interesting. People know the star. The logos are already set in most of these cases. Yes, teams rebrand every once in a while, but for the most part, pretty
Right.
stable. New jerseys, new colors, that kind of thing. But the Cowboys are the Cowboys. Their brand not only shows up in their uniforms and on the field, but it shows up. The Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, have a specific brand, and they're a sub brand of that. The stadium, how it's been designed, it's the biggest, most audacious, screen you can ever imagine. Everything's big in Texas, right? Like, so there's a lot of those pieces that are in place. I'd be remiss, because I just have to, the 49ers brand right now is losing Super Bowls. And as a Seahawks fan, I just had to get that in there. You don't have to comment, but that's from all
I'm in
my
the division now. I am not touching that, and I respect the hell out of the Niners. So
I'm sure you do, sir. If I do not, and all my Bay Area friends will, I'm sure I'll hear from them for that comment. But no, so getting back to you and getting back to the Cardinals. So I will say, as someone who is an avid football fan and an avid fan of the Seahawks, so I know been in the division with the Cardinals for a lot of years. It's been a team that has not yet really enjoyed a lot of winning and a lot of success. And one of the best ways to establish a brand is to win. And so I'm curious, what's the relationship? How do you approach creating meaning in what it means to be a Cardinal when, you can't control the outcome on the field?
Yeah. So what's interesting about that question is, remember, I worked at the Dolphins for a long time too.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in the same position, and we never walked into a season with the idea of, hey, we're only as good as our, whatever happens out of our control. Like, we always walked in like, okay, all things are equal. And back when it was a 16-game season, if we're gonna be 8-8, right, neutral, let's start at a neutral state. What can we do on the brand side to make this really killer work, right? To get people really excited. And if the team does well, it amplifies everything. But we're not going to be dependent on that. We're going to really grow the storytelling, and the brand itself. So we always started with that. Now, when a team isn't doing as well, it's the inverse, in my opinion, for people that do what I do. We end up having to ramp up, and we have to lift. We can lift the fans, right? Or at least try to. Um, Obviously, the football team, like, that's king. Like, if they win, you don't have to do much. Like,
Uh-huh.
everyone's so happy. But on our side, like, we get to be like kind of the balancing act of some of that stuff. I've seen clubs, the ones that are actually really successful on the football side. It's funny. I try to do a bit of mental audit around the league, like, who's the content and creative teams. Like, do they have to work hard? Are they good, quote unquote? Are
Uh-huh.
they good? Right.
Uh-huh.
Some of them don't have to do as much of lift because they go to playoffs every year. I felt that way when I got here to Tennessee. When I got to Tennessee, we were hitting playoffs every year, every year, and the fans, anything we put down, the fans were loving. And then the last couple seasons, it kind of got a little rocky there, and it was uncharted territory for the fan base. And I remember thinking, I must have gotten a little complacent there, because normally I'm not taken by surprise by something like this. We can rock with it. So, I mean, that to me, the wins and losses part, I don't really focus in too much on it, because my job is going to be the same anyway. I have to build something and tell some stories. It's easier when we're winning. There's more stories to tell.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But if we're creative, we need a little bit of that challenge.
Well, and so a couple more things on this part. So the Cardinals have the third pick in the draft this year, fourth pick in the draft. Thank you. Behind the Patriots. So that's a very high pick for people that aren't football fans. It's, you're going to get a player who's going to be a big part of the storytelling for the team. And the Cardinals, I believe, have 2 first-round picks. I think they have the 27th pick as well. So you're going to get 2 of the best young players added to this team. You also already have a starting quarterback that was once I think a number 1 overall pick in Kyler Murray. And so I'm curious how you, not knowing who the team's going to pick and what this person's going to be like, how do you interact? Because a lot of times those players they have agents sometimes. they might have their own agency or their own PR group or their own kind of branding that they're working with. Do you collaborate with those folks? Do you try to bring them into your story? How does that part work?
The it depends on the player. Some of them do, and have their own content teams. Some of them are super sophisticated with that side of building. I've noticed more and more with the players coming into the league, they're more savvy on how to build their personal presence. Yeah, we're open to working with them. They're all different. I mean, I would say a really good example is DeAndre Hopkins. When he arrived in Nashville, he has a content team, and he was all about collaboration. He's um, very deliberate, very purposeful, right, with the way he shows up. And he also, it's no surprise, he's the same way on the football field, like where his preparation is the same, very thoughtful, very purposeful. So he's one of those where we ended up collaborating with him and his team. Access, if we're getting things, we'll send it to them, or vice versa. If we get a heads up if there's an event or something that he's going to be at. So any little thing, as long as it fits within our content plan, it's great, because then there's like nice collaboration there. With players coming in from, like for the Cardinals, like who knows, right? Like who knows how savvy, how much they want to do, how much of the presence. Every player is a little different. If they're open to it, it's great. I mean, player persona, especially when it comes to influencer and influencer marketing, it's so powerful. So if we can then kind of accompany that with our platform, then yeah, then it's, I think, all boats rise type of thing.
That's fascinating. You bring up influencer because that's where my mind goes a little bit. There is one of the first episodes, the first episode I did of this show. I was talking to someone who had 1 million followers back in the day and was the most followed woman on Twitter for a while. And everybody, like all kids, want to be influencers nowadays, and they're all trying to build these audiences and this attention. You've got, in some ways, a room full of influencers. They're not influencers in the sense of self-made from the ground up. They're influencers from their play on the field, and people following them. There's collaborations all over the place in the influencer world, but uh, trying to manage a room full of influencers, it feels like it would be really hard to keep people on brand, on message.
Yeah, and I don't try to manage their brand. Like
Mhm.
they're their own entity. They kind of go to market their way. We just look for intersections, because to your point, that would be wild. I mean, there's 53 guys in the roster. There's even more in the practice squad. Like there's just so many. It's and honestly, like they're more nimble a lot of times when they're
Mhm.
doing it themselves. We just look for some intersections, and so that's a little more manageable for us.
Uh, Two other pieces. So you are trying to establish, I mean, I would assume engagement is an important metric for you guys in the work that you're doing. The engagement defined by, how many eyeballs are paying attention for how long duration on what platforms, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or wherever else you guys are online. And then you've got a PR department, and PR department, public relations departments vary throughout the league and how they work and throughout, all industries. But in a lot of cases, PR is really trying to control the message and trying to make sure that press and other folks are telling the stories that they want to be told. So I'm curious, do you find that sometimes it can be a bit of a tense relationship with PR, where you guys want to do something that's maybe pushing a boundary? I'll give you a good example. The Chargers social media, like they kind of go way off and do some pretty amazing things. And some of the social media handles they say some pretty provocative things. And I wonder if at times there's a tension with PR of like, hey, like tone it down.
I would say, I mean, I couldn't really speak for the Chargers. I would assume, um, when they did their rebrand and they rolled that out, that rebrand included this new brand voice that they have,
Mm-hmm.
that they
Mm-hmm.
were all, it wasn't a surprise, right? It was very purposeful. They planned that out. Um, I don't envy the PR team, quite honestly, because you're right, they have to manage the media and they're managing what's going out. And a lot of times, the message, is just critical for the team, like the health of the team. Um, where I see us coming in is, we partner with them really well. The whole plan would be if we have narratives that we're trying to tell, a lot of that has come from PR and partnership. But hey, we want to tell these stories, and they're like, hey, how about this person, this person, this person? They have great stories to tell because they know they have the access to the guys. They have the deeper relationships a lot of times than the content teams do. So they're able to kind of throw us the bone, you know what I mean? And then we can kind of run with it, come up with something, and we work with in lockstep with those folks, to make sure that we're not accidentally putting something out there that's just in poor taste or something, or just quote unquote off brand, right? Like, so if you mentioned the Chargers, off on brand would is that this playful, this energy, this, this type of social first voice. It's a very youthful type of voice. They're all in on that. Not every team, that's their brand, right? Um, so I couldn't see. I don't want to make any assumptions of other brands, but like, it's just not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
And so, I would see other content teams like our team. I would hope they have a really strong and a close relationship with PR versus, a tug of war type of relationship, because that just goes nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, um, teams like mine, honestly, that was one of the best things, about my tenure with these clubs, is that I had heard some horror stories or whatever's. But if I were to go backwards, like the team in Arizona, awesome, like super collaborative. The team in Nashville, super collaborative. The team in Miami, like we had great relationships. Like we were like, there were like personal relationships there, which was great. So
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to do the work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things, Surf, that I think people understand or are aware of for players and coaches in pro sports is they have families and they lose their job or they get hired somewhere else, they got to relocate. You just talked about going from Miami to Nashville to Arizona, and there's only 32 NFL franchises. You can't go from Miami to somewhere else. Like you could go to Tampa, I guess. So there's some maybe more local changes you can make, but you can only go where the jobs. There's only 32 jobs to be had. How's that affected your decisions, as your family involved in these conversations?
Yes, very much so. My children are getting, they're older now. So for this particular decision going to Phoenix, they were definitely part of the decision. It wasn't like it was, their choice to make or veto or whatever, but I definitely wanted them to feel like they had a voice. Um, and my daughter's in high school, my son's in middle school, so like it's important, like they have their friend networks and things. um at the same time, like you said, there are only 32 of them in the NFL. It's
Mhm.
not like they're giving away these type of roles, so when they do come up, they definitely are. You want to pay attention. So yeah, like this particular, transition, if we wanted to use like an example, I'm in Nashville. Nashville's a great town. I mean, working with the music industry, working with the artists here, like it is a very energetic, magical place to be. So when the Phoenix opportunity, started to develop, man, talk about some sleepless nights, because it's like, okay, what should I do? And ultimately the decision came to, I felt really good at what we did in Nashville. I felt really good about the leadership that was there and the people that we were able to grow. Like it's their turn now, right? And so if I'm really the type of leader that I feel like I hope I could be, and I was developing these folks, like it's time for them to really, now they get to flex, and then I get to jump in for another group and get to help them grow. So it's, if I don't know, coaching tree maybe
Yeah.
starts to grow and get better.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's kind of fun. Like, the folks who I left in Nashville too, like they probably were like, man, we're not ready for this. Like, no, you're never ready, but you kind of are. You
Yeah.
know, you are.
Yeah. I can appreciate that. And it sounds like in this case, you kind of had your own personal journey of assessing, okay, do I want this job? Is this something that I would want if I can get it? And you made that kind of assessment yourself. And yeah, this is something I want. If your family or yeah, I don't know, some other factor was like, absolutely not, like, don't want to do this, dead set against it, how might that have played out? Would it have been the same and you just would have had a harder transition, or something else?
Something else. For me personally, all of it is for my family. Um, so if for any reason my family was just like no, or really afraid to do it, or something, um, I wouldn't have done it. It was the opposite. They were just like, they're excited. They're like adventurers now, so they're like always ready to
Hmm.
go and do something cool. So that part was super easy. My wife and I mean, we've been doing this for a while, and so we talk about it. Like, hey, the dream job could become a nightmare if we're not both on the same page.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and the thing I learned along the way is don't ignore the red flags, because those little red flags that are nagging in the back of your mind, like they're real. They only just present themselves in like a much realistic way later down the road. We made a move once where we were just like, all right, it's scary and red flags galore, and we're just like, all right, let's just do it anyway, type of thing. And then when we were in it, we were like really stressed, trying to figure it all out. And we did, but it was just one of those where it was a lesson of like, man, we really have to think this through before we just jump in.
Red flags in what regard? Like, about
It
the
could
job,
it
about
could
with
be
the relationship?
anything. It could be anything. Yeah. So like if there are any red flags in, like say you're interviewing for a job and there's someone says something that's like, huh, that's interesting.
Mm,
Or a culture type of conversation within a work environment. That, a lot of times when you're eager for a job, you're like, oh, I'll figure it out. Right. Oh, I'll figure it out. I'm strong enough. I work hard. I'm a hard worker. Right. And the reality is, everyone feels like they're a hard worker, but like, are you ready if a job says, hey, it's an 80-hour work week and you're going to have to cancel vacations and you may not see your best friends and so the NFL is not like that for me. But
mhm.
that's how it was in advertising when I was didn't have kids. My wife and I were, really early in our relationship and we were both in advertising. So for us, that life worked. And I remember interviewing people coming in and they're like, oh, I'm a hard worker. I was like, man, are you sure? You sure you know what hard work is? So yeah, those type of things I say you got to pay attention to, and not ignore them, because you want to make sure you have a good sense of self and a complete type of experience.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like your wife used to be in advertising. I don't know if she still is or still working. How does this affect her when you guys relocate?
Um, I mean, I uproot everyone, right? When we change the zip code. She is, she's the one that keeps it all together, honestly, because she's the mainstay. The kids are always looking to her for comfort and guidance. I'm looking to her for comfort and guidance. I get the easy part. Honestly, I get the part where it's like I get to go into a building super cool. I get to meet 1,000 people because I'm working on a thing or different projects, and my mind gets to kind of do all that stuff. She's keeping the family business afloat, like us, right?
Hmm.
Like she's making sure that we're all healthy, like mentally healthy, like happy, taken care of. She has the hardest job because it never shuts off. Like I get to come home and like my phone goes on do not disturb, right? Like not her. And then we get over ambitious and we start doing stuff in the community. And so then it's like, okay, we're always on.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, so I guess I have a couple questions just about how you got into this line of work. Um, and if I'm right, the first job you had was as a budget analyst?
Yeah, wow. I was a budget analyst. The reason why I was a budget analyst, I was like everyone else. So you go to college, you try to figure it out. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I worked at a bank because that's where I came from a family of bankers. They were all number
Uh-huh.
folks. And so I did that while I was trying to figure out life. And there was an ad agency whose partners were clients of a bank that I was working at. And it was a crossroads of like, hey, you could either continue on finance or you could take a shot at advertising, which I really wanted to do. Well, I decided to take a shot. My wife was like, go for it, man. Um, well, it turns out the only thing I was really qualified to do at the ad agency was be a budget analyst. so so I get in there and it was amazing. And I was like reviewing contracts and things like that for like these killer like TV productions and commercials and things like that. And eventually, because I was doing a lot of the creative stuff on my own, I just raised my hand and I asked the studio manager. I said, "Hey, I think I can do some of this. Like, you know, could I get a shot at it?" And they kind of did the double take, like, "Wait, what are you talking about? You're an accountant. You don't know anything about this stuff." And I showed them a really bad portfolio, and they actually gave me the chance because the agency was all about being a little more rebellious and being a
Mhm.
land of misfit toys type of thing. And so they took a flyer on me, like, sure. I mean, how bad could it be? I'd be a junior production artist. If it didn't work out, I could just go back to number crunching. So I jump in, and my first ad was a Volkswagen print ad when we were doing print. Um, and uh, and yeah, then the rest of it kind of wrote itself. I kept doing more ads, and one day they asked me if I wanted to be an art director, um, and I jumped at it because somebody went on vacation. I got to fill in, and I worked with her partner, and the copywriter and I started working on ads, or at least a pitch for Nike, which was like bananas to me. It's like, what? I can't believe this is happening to me. But I just kept every time someone cracked a door open, I just kind of just grabbed it and tried to make the most of it, and it just kept building.
So you're doing the ad stuff for a while and moving up in that industry. What what opened the door to the NFL? How did that happen?
So when you're in advertising, you're in the idea business, and so you have a bunch of clients, and so that type of work environment is super exciting, but it's also very strenuous. So my wife and I we started a family, and I remember we needed to make an adjustment. I couldn't do the all nighters. I couldn't do 7 days a week type of thing. And so I left the agency first when we had our first child. She left when we had our second, because we were working at the same place at the time. Um, and I decided to go client side. And that's when you're in advertising, it's either your client side or your agency, right? Client side is like one brand and
Mhm.
you get to go deep. Agency, you're going wide, and it's just a different type of creative exercise. I was ready to go deep. Um, so I jumped over and I got a position at Adidas North America out of Portland, Oregon, because I believed in health and sport instead of like selling fast food and soda and burgers and stuff. I didn't eat that stuff. I didn't really believe in it. So found a client that I really thought would be exciting and I could align with, and started doing that. And that's what got the door open, because I had to go in and build an in-house team and take what I learned in advertising and apply it to this division at Adidas, which was amazing. And then once I did it there, someone at the Dolphins recognized it, and they were like, "Hey, we're trying to do the same thing over here. Would you be interested?" And I thought, yeah, that would be amazing. I have to go back home. My kids get to be by their grandparents. This is awesome. And did it. And that's how it opened. That's how the door opened. And so my job was to create an in-house team and teach folks how to make really cool work.
I love that. That's fascinating. So besides the fact that I'm sure Portland was a rough go for you, weather-wise, I grew up there, so I'm a fan.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not Miami or Nashville or Arizona from a weather perspective. But for folks that maybe aren't following all the detail, I think agency work, when you're at a creative agency or an ad agency, you're working with a number of different clients. You might work with Adidas and then Miami and the Dolphins and then 10 other companies throughout the week. And so you're doing some level of depth. It's not superficial, but it's definitely it's not super deep either, with a lot of different companies. And so you made the decision to hop over to the client side, where there's some folks on the agency side that cannot imagine spending all day, every day for years working on one brand or one product, or one company. And so you made that call. And when you did that with Adidas, you also happened to pick a sports, fitness brand to work with, which then had some resonance with an NFL franchise that happens to be an adjacency to that. So I think people sometimes miss these serendipitous, but they think it's luck, but it's also, there's intentionality to it. You were interested in this particular type of work and you were motivated to build that brand, and that opened doors that were related to it because you did good work in that space. And so really, really cool to kind of hear how that worked out for you.
Yeah, the agency, and you nailed it. Like, it's not superficial. Like, you're really, really pushing a client and try to grow their business, right? So you're really putting effort into your clients when you're in an agency. The thing is, you may, as a creative, be assigned to let's just say 5 different clients. So like, there were times, I mean, more honestly, if you're a good agency. So there were days I remember where in the morning I would be working on Harley Davidson. So getting in my mind into like biker dude, how do we sell bikes, right? Like, it's freaking sweet. And then in the afternoon, breastfeeding pillows, like, which is like, they were just worlds apart. Which the beautiful thing about that, though, is that from a creative exercise perspective, you become very elastic. You learn how to think like different types of demographics. You learn what's going to make them purchase this thing or be compelled to pay attention. So that part makes you just like a creative weapon, being able to do that. And I was one of those people. I could not imagine being part of one brand. That would have been boring, right? Lack of a better term. What happened was, I was always the guy at the agency with a couple others that we were like the sports guys. So whenever there was a client who like wanted to do something in football or college football or something, they would ask us to kind of do like internal little focus group. So yeah, I kind of started leading that way. So the Adidas thing, was fortunate, and it aligned with basically my values, where I wanted to go. And yeah, it became a different type of exercise now. But you find the opportunities, like when you're a company like Adidas, like, there's so many different categories, and they end up being like clients: running, training, team sports, kids, like you learn how to then think like these different demos anyway. So I was able to use those skills from advertising and just apply it in like a much more concentrated and focused area.
Yeah, as someone who's always been on the client side of that equation, you know, I always felt that there was varying engagements with agencies. Some of
Right.
them were great, some of them not as great, but the consistent part was they weren't the ones left with the outcome. Like
Right.
I had to own whether their work was good or not good, whether they made good decisions or not.
Right.
I had to then take that work and make it real and go through all the different effects of that. And so there's always on the client side a little bit of, you're not really in this with us, you're not in the foxhole with us, but we do want, your excellence and your creative excellence and your thought. And so it's an interesting dance that gets played there, and for both sides, to figure out how to make that a really effective engagement.
Yeah, it is an interesting dance. I think the more effective ones, and I guess that's the every agency's goal is to be the agency of record, right, for
Hmm.
someone, so then they
Right.
can at least grow the relationship, and then the client, the brand, could feel like, okay, you're in it with us, you're part of us. I Like I said, I was at an agency that I was very fortunate. It was right place, right time, and a lot of smart people, and those were the type of clients they had. They had clients that they had for a while, so we would get to really deepen the relationship. So we felt like we were the brand, or the
Yeah.
brands that were our clients. It was odd to me when I went client side and I started working with agencies. Um, it was odd to me to look at an agency just for a project.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was weird. It was weird. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense to me because, like, to your point, if how about it's going to take a while for us to even get to know each other. How about if I don't like the work? You
Hmm.
know, um, I felt like I was the cool client because whenever I would hire agencies, I knew what they were going through,
Uh-huh.
so we could speak the same
Yeah.
language.
Yes. Yeah, well, cool, or you can also see the BS, and so they're like, "Oh,
Right.
wait, maybe
Yeah.
this isn't gonna work out."
Right.
Well, I'm cognizant of making sure I don't take all your time. I do have a few more questions if you've got a few more minutes here.
For sure.
One, you mentioned someone opened the door for you, when you were a budget analyst to get into this kind of work. I'm curious if you look back over your time, your career, are there people that stand out to you as folks that were big influences on your career that opened doors for you, or helped kind of coach you to get to where you are now?
100%. Like, you can't. I think when I was younger and didn't know really much about like where I'm going to take my career, and I just felt like, okay, with my effort will be enough, and it wasn't. All the effort did was just give me uh, a good face, so that when someone who actually wanted to mentor or be open to teach, um, they were open to teach me. And so, yeah, so I mean, I mentorship for me was a huge part of it. You know, I had some creative directors who, because I was the guy who was the budget analyst coming over, I don't know if they felt sorry for me or whatever, but they felt like they needed to teach me a little more. And I enjoyed it a lot because I got to basically, it felt like going to college again. I was learning, but on the job, like real learning. And it was very selfless. I mean, it felt selfless, maybe because I was assigned to them. They wanted to make sure I was doing the job well, but I felt like they gave me so much. Um, I mean, they were a bunch. I mean, Dave Schiff, Alex Bernard, Dave Swartz, like these are all art directors and copywriters. Alex Boguski, who like ran the whole agency, he wasn't a direct mentor of mine, but his influence, and the way he approached these projects and the culture that we created, I got to sit around. I absorbed it all. I was just trying to be such a good student, and even indirect mentorship that way was like super impactful for me. Um, it got to a point where once I started to apply some of the things that I was learning, and it started to work, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, these guys were right. This stuff is really like sticking." Um, I got to be fortunate enough where I could give it back. And that's where, I mean, we're always learning, right? We're always trying new things. But part of the learning process for me now is giving it. So that's, and I mean, kind of going full circle to the earlier question that we started this conversation with, like measures of success and things. Like, man, it is amazing when I get to work with these creatives and they don't know who I am. I get to build a relationship with them and build some trust and then teach them a few things, and then it works for them and they start building and growing and then become managers, directors, or whatever. Like, whoa, like that's super cool. That's the best part.
Last question. What are you most proud of in your career?
um I don't, it's not really a thing. It's not like a project. um I think the thing I really am most proud of are the people that I've met along the way. They're I've been able to have positive impact on some folks. They've told me, and that's like a gift, man. When someone tells you, "Hey, thank you because you inspired me to do X, Y, Z," and that was never my intention. Like I didn't really go in, but when it kind of catch you off guard a little bit. Um, and I've been fortunate enough to put my effort into folks, and it actually pays off. So like, I don't want to name them, but at the stops, especially the most recent stops, maybe because I'm just getting older and I'm getting better at it or something, I don't know. But um, in the NFL, like there have been some teammates that I've worked with that, man, they've really have just blossomed, grown, right? Dude, that is that's incredible. Like, that's incredible. Going into Arizona right now and meeting this new team and being able to say, "Hey, why don't you talk to so and so who I just worked with," right? And that person is they're ready. Like, they're ready to help you because they know what it's like to be in your shoes. And I was able to witness that transformation. Like, and it just keeps growing and building upon itself. Like that's to me, that's the thing that I'm most proud of, quite honestly.
That, everybody, is Surf Melendez. Surf, I am so grateful that you took time out of your day to tell me and everyone else about what you do and how you've gotten here. Where should folks follow if they want to see your work? What's a good place to follow and find you?
Um, well, first and foremost, follow the Arizona Cardinals. Because we're going to be going through some really cool changes as far as our creative and our content. My hope is that I can help make an impact sooner than later. And then if you want to follow me, which I don't know why would anyone want to do that, I am on X, Surf M. I'm also on Instagram, Surf M. And sometimes I'll put some fun stuff on LinkedIn.
Love it. Surf, thank you again. This has been great. And this has been another episode of the Work Dad podcast. Appreciate you and hope you have a great day, man.
Thanks for having me. This is great.